Welcome everyone to this live podcast on Twitch, where you can find the news from the research industry itself, that how our researchers keep on researching on various topics and domain to keep our lifestyle better, of course. And these articles posted on our website named postscientist.com. So, if you're willing to check it out, please check it out. Otherwise, listening to this podcast will be enough for you guys, as it acts like an archive on the daily basis, providing you the information from the research industry itself. So, let's get started without wasting any further time. The first topic of the day: an architecture that gives users fully control of their smartphones. In recent years, many smartphone users have become concerned about the privacy of their data and the extent to which companies might have access to this data. As things stand today, the application that user can run on their phone and what they can do with these applications is determined by a few big tech companies. Researchers at ETH Zurich have recently set out a quest to change this current trend through the development of a new smartphone architecture called TEE Time. This architecture, introduced in a paper pre-published on Arziv, allows users to flexibly choose what resources on their smartphone they will dedicate to legacy operating systems such as Android or iOS, and which they wish to keep for their own proprietary software and data. This work was inspired in part by our experiences in developing Swiss contact tracing application, where we quickly noticed how limited we are as researcher developers in accessing some basic services on our phones. Sir, Serge Jan Capgun, one of the researchers who carried out the study, told Tech Explode. These experiences taught us that even governments need to negotiate with prominent phone OS vendors, Apple/Google, to gain specific access, such as Bluetooth radios. This example caused us to look more broadly into restriction we face today on our smartphones, which have politically and economic application for citizens, companies, and governments. Of course, man. The lack of user control over resources on a smartphone is typically justified by operating system developers and phone providers as a necessary means to offer security and privacy. Specifically, one might argue that opening smartphone system would endanger user, that is, increasing the vulnerability to attacks and adversely affect their overall navigation experience. The key objective of the recent work by Gottschalk et al. Was to show that one could potentially grant user greater control over their phone while retaining existing operating systems with their functionalities and security measures. To do this, the team developed TEE Time, a new smartphone design architecture that allows different domains running simultaneously to coexist on a smartphone. With TEE Time, we provide concurrently executing domains that are productive from each other using hardware features incorporated in current CPUs platforms. Gorship explained. User can run several domains on their phone, example of fully Android iOS with all the convenience and security that they provide, and in a parallel a proprietary software running in another domain. Essentially, TEE time isolates different domains, allowing user to decide to the extent to which each of these domains has access to resources on their phone. This means that user could, for instance, run a navigation application in their own isolated domain, giving a GPS access only to this domain and thus preventing Android iOS from accessing their GPS data. The same could also be done with other peripherals such as Bluetooth or the phone inbuilt microphone and camera. The introduction of domains has two main advantages in terms of giving user control over their devices, Godship explained. Firstly, it gives users fully control of the privacy of their data, for instance, allowing them to store their photos in a separate domain where the user can make sure that no client side scanning is performed. Note that in current phone ecosystem, these features can be silently introduced without the user even noticing or having the possibility to opt out. Of course, man. The second advantage of the TEE time architecture is that it can prevent censorship or increase resistance to it. In other words, if the operating service provider blocks an application or prevents them from installing it, they can still run it in a separate domain. Of course, man. So far, the researcher tested a prototype of this architecture on an ARM emulator, a software tool often used to test operating system and other smartphone software. These initial evaluations were promising as they suggested that TEE time works well and does not impact a system security, which shows that it is indeed possible to run a software that is mutually distrusting on one phone with hardware primitives that already exist, Gorchub explained. We hope this lead to a change in the public perception of the smartphone ecosystem. Usability, security, and user control are not mutually exclusive. An important design choice for us was to refrain from leveraging hypervisors as we wanted to avoid complex, high privilege software on their phones, since this would require again trusting large commercial entities with this with its development and updates. In the future, the architecture developed by this team of researchers could pave the way for the creation of other small software solution that gives users greater control over their smartphone. In the meantime, Kaushab and her colleagues plan to develop TEE time further to overcome limitation that could potentially hinder its large-scale implementation. Our ambition is to develop a fully working phone prototype and through its inspired phone manufacturer to support this design. Gorship added, we are currently working on a number of remaining issues, including securing user interaction with our system and investigating changes to hardware that would make our solution simpler to integrate and even more efficient. Okay, moving on to our next topic. Fossil discovery in storeroom cupboard shifts origin of modern lizard back 35 million years. I mean, if I'm talking about the last architecture given by our researchers, I mean, it's a great initiative, and many of our users and many of the people are afraid of this thing and try to constantly change and get into those privacy because everyone needs their privacy, not need to publicly open those things. So it's more likely be private to that person only, not fully expressed by the governments or by the any other organization which he's trying to control it, or any other data company which is trying to control those systems. So it's more likely important for everyone to use this architecture on their phones, whether it's whatever the software really is, whether it is an iOS or an Android. So I guess it's totally depend on the company itself, but still, like we all said, for thief there is no such security thing. They just need to have access. They need to get done those things. So it's more likely a fight going on between the thief and between the thief and a company which is constantly trying to overcome those things, and that's why many times patches has been delivered by their companies, whether it's a Windows or an Android or an iOS. So yeah, I mean, it's a constant process goes on, of course, man. Okay, moving on to our next topic. Fossil discovery in storeroom cupboard shifts origin of modern lizard back 35 million years. A specimen retrieved from a cupboard in the Natural History Museum in London has shown that modern lizards originated in the late Jurassic and not the Middle Jurassic as previously thought. Okay, this fossilized relative of living lizards such as monitor lizards, Gila monsters, and slow worms was identified in a stored museum collection from the 1950s, including specimens from a quarry near Totworth in Gloucestershire, southwest England. The technology didn't exist then to expose its contemporary features. As a modern type lizard, the new fossil impacts all estimated of the origin of lizards and snakes, together called the schemata, and affects assumptions about their rates of evolution and even the key trigger for the origin of the group. The team, led by Dr. David Whiteside of Bristol School of Earth Sciences, have named their incredible discovery cryptovernonids microlanius, meaning butch, small bucture, in tribute to its jaws that were filled with sharp edge slicing teeth. Dr. Whiteside explained, I first spotted this specimen in a cupboard full of Clavosaurus fossils in the storerooms of the Natural History Museum in London, where I am a scientific associate. This was a common inner fossil reptile, a close relative of the New Zealand tuatara that is the only survivor of the group. The rhinoslopalia that split from the squamates over 240 million years ago. Our specimen was simply labeled Clavosaurus and one other reptile. As we continue to investigate the specimen, we become more and more convinced that it was actually more closely related to modern day lizards than the Tuatara group. We made X-ray scan of the fossil at the university, and this enabled us to reconstruct the fossil in three dimensions and to see all the tiny bones that were hidden inside the rock. Cryptovernoids is clearly a squamate as it differs from the rhinocephalidia in the brain case, the neck vertebrae in the shoulder region, in the presence of a median upper tooth in the front of the mouth, the way the teeth are set on a shelf in the jaws rather than fused to the crest of the jaws, and in the skull architecture, such as the lack of lower temporal bar. There is only one major primitive feature not found in modern squamates, an opening on one side of the end of the upper arm bone, the humerus, where an artery and nerve pass through. Cryptovernoids does have some other apparently primitive characters, such as few rows of teeth on the bones of the roof of the mouth, but experts have observed the same in the living European glass lizard, and many snakes such as boas and pythons have multiple rows of large teeth in the same area. Despite this, it is advanced like most living lizards, in its brain case, and the bone connection in the skull suggest that it was flexible. In terms of significance, our fossil shifts the origin and diversification of squamates back from the Middle Jurassic to the Late Jurassic, says co-author Professor Mike Benton. This was a time of major restru- restructuring of ecosystem on land, with origin of new plants group, especially modern type conifers, as well as new kinds of insects, and some of the first of modern groups such as turtles, crocodilians, dinosaurs, and mammals. Adding the oldish modern scumates then completes the picture. It seems these new plants and animals came on their scene as part of a major rebuilding of life on Earth after the end Permian mass extinction 252 million years ago, and especially the Carnian Puvel episode 232 million years ago, when climates fluctuated between wet and dry caused great perturbation to life. PhD research scientist Sophia Chambi Trovel commented, the name of the new animal, Cryptovernoids microlanius, reflects the hidden nature of the beast in its raw but also in its likely lifestyle, living in cracks in the limestone on small islands that existed around Bristol. At the time, the species name meaning small butcher refers to its jaws that were filled with the sharp edged slicing teeth, and it would have preyed on arthropods and small vertebrates. Dr. Whiteside concluded, this is a very special fossil and likely to become one of the most important found in the last few decades. It is fortunate to be held in national collection. In this case, the National History Museum, London. We would like to thank the late Pamela L. Robinson, who recovered the fossil from the quarry and did a lot of preparation work on the type specimen and associated bones. It was such a pity she did not have access to CT scanning technology to help her observe all the detail of the specimen. Moving on to our next topic. I'm not into the archaeological side, so I have no opinions about it, so please forgive me. Okay. Moving on towards next topic. Mongolian fossil is first known species of streamlined non-avian theropod dinosaur to walk on two legs. Okay, okay. A team of researchers from Seoul National University, the University of Alberta, and the Mongolian Academy of Sciences has identified the first known example of a streamlined non-avian theropod dinosaur to walk on two legs. In their paper published in Communication Biology, the group describes where the fossil was found, its condition, and its features that were used to help identify it as a new dinosaur species. The dinosaur was excavated at the Hadmian Skull fossil formation in Mongolia back in 2008 as a part of the Korean Mongolian International Dinosaur Expedition. Since that time, it has been in storage with hundreds of other fossils awaiting study by experts. In the study of the fossil, the researcher found it will be well preserved and nearly complete. It had most of its two hind limbs, one of its forelimbs, most of its skulls, and most of its spinal column. It also had a mouthful of teeth. The researcher noted that the skeleton was similar in shape to many modern water birds, sleek and trim, suggesting it lived on or near the water and survived by fishing offshore. The researcher also noted that its ribs pointed towards its tail, another common feature of water birds, but it was not avian. There was no sign of wings. The researcher also noted that the overall shape of the skeleton suggested very strongly that it did not use its forelimbs for walking, likely giving it a penguin like gait. Their findings suggest the dinosaur belonged to the theropod family and had not been identified before, thus, it represented a newly discovered species. They named it Natovenator polydontus, which roughly translates to hunter that swims and has a lot of teeth. They suggest it also most closely resembled Hell's Craptor, another known avian dinosaur that also lived in what is now Mongolia. Of course. The dinosaur was found in a rock formation dating from the upper Cre- Cretaceous, which places it roughly 100 million to 66 million years ago. The researchers said it was adapted to semi-aquatic lifestyle that was similar to modern water birds, though its large number of trees suggest it had a more varied diet. Of course, right. Moving on to our next topic, study indicates SARS-CoV-2 variants are still transmissible between species. Scientists believe bats first transmitted SARS-CoV-2 to humans in December 2019, and while the virus has since evolved into several variants such as Delta and Omicron, a new study indicates the virus is still highly transmissible between mammals. Researchers at Roster Institute of Technology (RIT) developed computer simulation that showed the coronaviruses use their spike protein to attach themselves to the host cells in both bats and humans in much of the same way. The findings were published in a Royal Society Open Science study by recent RIT alumnus Madhusudan Rajendran, 22, MS Bioinformatics, and Associate Professor Grigory Babbitt from the Thomas H. Gonchnell School of Life Sciences. They studied how the viral spike proteins in several SARS CoV 2 variants interact with the host cell receptor, known as ECE2, in both humans and various bats of genus Rhinophilopus. Babbitt said the results were surprising. We were hoping to see really cool adaptive evolution happening as the virus got more used to humans and less used to bats, but we actually saw that there wasn't a whole lot of change, said Babbitt. Because this binding site has not evolved very much, there are really not much stopping it from transmitting from human to bats. If you look at the phylogenetic relationships of bats to humans, we are pretty far apart on the mammalian tree, so it suggests that there would be pretty widespread cross species ineffectivity, and the literature has shown there been a lot of evidence of that. The scientists use a computer simulation method called molecular dynamics to put proteins in a solvated simulation and then watch them move. The approach uses high performance computing on graphic processors to show what every atom does over time. Babbitt said this approach scientists to study questions that cannot be answered in a traditional laboratory. It would be dangerous to do experiments where we reinfected bats with human viral strains, so our complete base simulation offered a much safer alternative, said Babbitt. Okay, okay, of course. Moving on to our next topic. Going back to basics yields a printable, transparent plastic that's highly conductive. It was a simple idea, maybe even too simple to work. Research scientist James Ponder and a team of Georgia Tech chemists and engineers thought they could design a transparent polymer film that would conduct electricity as effectively as other commonly used material while also being flexible and easy to use at an industrial scale. They did do it by simply removing the non-conductive material from their conductive element. Sounds logical, right? The resulting process could yield new kinds of flexible transparent electronic devices, things like variable biosensor, organic photovoltaic cells, and virtual or augmented reality displays and glasses. We had this initial idea that we have a conductive element that we are covering with a non conductive material. So, what if we just get rid of that? Said Ponder, who earned a PhD in chemistry at Georgia Tech and returned as a research scientist in mechanical engineering. It's a simple idea, and there were so many points where it could have failed for different reasons, but it does work, and it works better than we expected. To make a plastic film that can carry an electric charge, chemists start with a known polymer backbone, in this case, a popular polymer called PDOT that's used in industry in certain formulations. It's great for conducting electricity, but different to use in its bare form because it's insoluble. However, when side chains are added to the P dot, it can be dissolved and used like a printable ink or a spray paint. That makes it easy to use and apply. Unfortunately, those side chains are essentially waxy material, and wax isn't so great at electrical conductivity. If you think about electrical conductivity, imagine a copper wire. It's nice and conductive. Then you cover it with wax, and it's not as conductive. You have a barrier, Ponder said. The idea was we really want both. We want the side chain for processing, but we don't want them in our final material. So we add side chain that once we are done with the processing, we can knock off and wash away. In other words, Ponder and his collaborator create the polymer with side chain, print or spray it to apply chemically sleeve the side chain and wash them away with common industrial solvents. After a financial conversion step, the result is a flexible, highly conductive film that's stable and now impervious to water or other solvents. The research team spanned mechanical engineering, chemistry and biochemistry, and material science and engineering. They have published their work in a pair of studies this year in two chemistry journals, first describing the idea and proving it could work in the Journal of the American Chemical Society, and in recent weeks optimizing the design for maximum conductivity in a study in Angevandate Chemici. This idea that we have come up with a way to make a polymer that has a conductivity of foam of more than 1000 Siemens per centimeter that is able to be produced using simple industrial printing method and solvents that the industrial people like, and that on top of conductivity have this optical transparency is just so expensive to me, said John Reynolds, professor in the School of Chemistry and Biochemistry and one of the co authors of the two papers. I just get very excited about it. Reynolds was Ponder's PhD advisor when Ponders come back to Georgia Tech after a postdoctoral fellowship. He joined Associate Professor Shannon Yee Labs in the George W. Woodruff Woodroof School of Mechanical Engineering. Because of those connections, Ponder became the bridge that cemented the collaboration. The team developed the molecule through chemistry. They measured their effectiveness with engineering. James basically put his feet in both camps and served as the conduit between the groups, said Reynolds, who also is who also is jointly appointed in the School of Material Science and Engineering. This multidisciplinary approach to research is the reason I made the move to Georgia Tech 11 years ago. I was excited about the ability to easily cross between the College of Sciences and the College of Engineering. Having collaborations such as these with Shannon are really important, and this is what makes Georgia Tech tick. The team already is attracting attention for their material, which they call P.OH. They have a patent application process and are meeting with industry collaborators interested in licensing the technology because of a few key advantages of the films. One of the most widely used transparent conductors for flat panel displays photovoltaics, smart windows, and other application is indium tin oxide. However, the material has some drawbacks, Reynolds said. It is quite difficult to make curved and flexible devices using indium tin oxide because it's a brittle material that cracks, he said. These polymers we have designed are mechanical flexible. There's an entire area called bioelectronics where people are putting electronic devices onto skin and into implantable devices where mechanical flexibility is very important. That's where these kinds of material will shine. Another advantage, indium tin oxide must be used in thin films to balance how it's prepared with maximum conductivity and transparency. The Georgia Tech team's material, on the other hand, can be easily processed to thick films that maintain their conductivity. One real benefit here is that you have a lot of control over how you process the material, said Ponder, who now works for the US Air Force Research Laboratory. Industrially, the biggest benefit to this in my mind is that if you want a 20 nanometer film, you can do that. Or if you want 1 micron film, which is 500 times thicker, you can do that too. You really have a lot more control. Ponder said other researchers have experimented with breaking off their side chain of polymer to boost conductivity, but their work usually only removed a few of the chain. Plus, that process wasn't the main thrust of their research. It's combining the right type of polymer backbone with the right type of breakable linkage for the right application. High electrical conductivity, in this case, Ponder said, for the most part, other researchers haven't been doing this. They didn't cleave off enough chain and use a well designed backbone. Reynolds said the simplicity of the team polymer was key. Being able to make a very simple, straightforward backbone to this polymer is what really has led to the high level of conductivity. Great, man. Great, great, great. Moving on to our next topic. I mean, it's a great finding. Okay. James Webb Telescope produces an unparalleled view of the ghostly light in galaxy clusters. Okay, and cluster of galaxy there is a fraction of stars which wander off into intergalactic space because they are pulled out by huge tidal forces generated between the galaxies in the cluster. The light emitted by these stars is called the intra-cluster light (ICL) and is extremely faint. Its brightness is less than 1% of the brightness of the darkest sky we can observe from Earth. This is one reason why images taken from space are very valuable for analyzing it. Infrared wavelength allows us to explore clusters of galaxies in a different way than with visible light thanks to its efficiency at infrared wavelengths and the sharpness of the images of the GWST IAC researchers Maria Montes and Ignacio Trujillo have been able to explore the intracluster light from SMAG's GJ0723.37327 with an unprecedented level of detail. In fact, the images from the JWST of the center of this cluster are twice as deep as the previous images obtained by the Hubble Space Telescope. In this study, we showed that great potential of JWST for observing an object which is so faint, explains Media Montes, the first author of the article. This will let us study galaxy clusters which are much further away and in much greater detail, she adds. In order to analyze this extremely faint ghostly light, as well as needing the observational capability of the new space telescope, the researchers have developed new analysis techniques which improve on existing methods. In this work, we needed to do some extra processing to the JWST images to be able to study the intra-cluster light as it is a faint and extended structure that was key to avoid biases in our measurements, says media. Thanks to the data obtained, the researchers have been able to demonstrate the potential of the intracluster light for studying and understanding the processes which go into the formation of structure as massive as cluster of galaxies. Analyzing this diffuse light, we find that the inner parts of the cluster are being formed by merger of massive galaxies, while the outer parts are due to the accretion of galaxies similar to our Milky Way, she notes. But these observations not only offers clues about the formation of galaxy clusters, but also about the properties of a mysterious component of our universe, dark matter. The stars which emit the intra-cluster light follow the gravitational field of the cluster, which makes this light an excellent tracer of the distribution of the dark matter in these structures. The, the JWST will let us characterize the distribution of the dark matter in this enormous structure with unprecedented precision and throw light on its basic nature, concludes Agnio Trigila, the second author of the article. The paper is published in the Astrophysical Journal Letters. Moving on to our next topic. DeepMind new AI app plays Stratego at expert level. Okay, let's see. A team of researchers at DeepMind Technology Limited has created an AI application called Deep Nash that is able to play the game Stratego at an expert level. In the paper published in the journal Science, the group described the unique approach they took to improve the app's level of play. Stratego is a two-player board game and is considered to be difficult to master. The goal for each player is to capture their opponent's flag, which is hidden among the initial 40 game pieces. Each of the game pieces is marked with a power ranking. High ranked players defeat lower ranked players in face off. Making the game more difficult is that neither player can see the markings on the opponent's game pieces until they meet face to face. Prior research has shown that the complexity of the game is higher than that of chess or Go, with 10 to power 535 possible game scenarios. This level of complexity makes it extremely challenging for computer experts attempting to create Stratego playing AI systems. In this new effort, the researcher took a different approach, creating an app capable of beating most human and other AI systems. As, oth- as with other AI system design, Deep Nash first learned to play Stratego by playing itself many times, in this case 5.5 million billion times, equivalent to hundreds of years of playing time for a human. After it learned how to play, the researcher did not have it attempt to learn strategies from mastered human players or even to play against other opponents in general. Instead, the researcher devised an algorithm that worked toward an optimal strategy for each move rather than perfection. The algorithm was based on game theory. An optimal strategy would give Deep Nash a 50-50 chance of success at a minimum on any given mode, far better than humans could hope to achieve. Testing showed that the team had found a way to improve the odds of an AI app playing Stratego. It achieved an 84% winning record while playing 50 times and on an online gaming platform, and in so doing become one of the top 3 players on the site, and the human opponents were never told they were playing against a computer. Okay, okay. I mean, it's a great initiative, and of course, if it's done so, it's been. I mean, it's been a great game for many of our players out there, And of course, the possibility is being very vast and varieties of things. So I guess it's more likely a game of aristocracy. So yeah, great man. I mean, we should try these things. Otherwise, it's been very. Yep. Moving on to our next topic: making science more accessible to people with disabilities. The pandemic promoted workplace changes that prove beneficial to people with disabilities in science, technology, engineering, math, and medicine, STEM. But there's fear that these accommodations will be rolled back with International Day of Person with Disabilities taking place on December 3rd. A research team including faculty at Binghamton University, State University of New York, is calling for ways to make work in STEM more accessible. We are increasingly but hearing about how nice it is to all be together again, as well as calls to put the pandemic behind us and increasingly strident demand for pre-pandemic normal, said Binghamton University Associate Professor of Anthropology Catherine Vander. We are worried that lessons learned during the pandemic will be lost. Vander, along with University of New Mexico Associate Professor of Anthropology Siobhan Madison and others outlined the situation and the framework for potential solutions. The paper draws on insights from disability studies and interdisciplinary field of research that explored the way that disabilities are created by social processes as well as biological ones. Many people within STEM are unaware of disability studies, insights, and can fail to see their social dimension, the author said. The dynamics of exclusion on the basis of disability also overlap with other exclusionary dynamics, such as those based on sex, gender, sexual orientation, race, ethnicity, or socioeconomic status. While each type of exclusion has elements in common, they also have their own unique dimensions, the author acknowledged. Vendor points to the commonalities among experience of exclusion to consider how they might much best be mitigated. Working from home, for example, not only benefits some people with disabilities, but also people from minority, racial, or ethnic groups, some of whom found that remote work elevated much of their bias they experience in the workplace. That being said, not everyone finds remote work accessible, as it depends on recent internet access, among other factors. In short, there is no single simple solution that will increase inclusion for any one group. Instead, the author advocated an approach based on three pillars: flexibility, accommodation, and modification. FAM. Proving more flexibility in the workplace will expand the contributions of people with disabilities and others who face various constraints, such as the need to provide care for family members when broad flexibility isn't possible or enough accommodations should be available to help people achieve their role core functions. Modification of work duty can also help STEM retain the insight and efforts of people whose disability sometimes or persistently impede their ability to work in positions that are not designed for them. Adopting FAM strategies, however, involves changing long standing practices and could involve same some financial cost to institutions. However, the benefits of science students and patients are likely to be substantial, the author says. Ultimately, the FAM approach can benefit everyone. While someone may not be considered disabled today, injuries, illness, and aging may change their circumstances in the future. The phenomenon of long COVID, the author point out, reminds us that no one is more than one illness away from lasting disability. Inclusion is a proactive responsibility. If we are going to state that everyone deserves a seat at the table, then we have to make sure that places are set for everyone. Madison said, co-authors in addition to Madison and Wonder include Logan Ginn of Brown University, Stratton Center for Teaching and Learning, Alistair Abraham of George Washington University Department of Pediatrics, Megan Mordy of Anthropology Department at the University of California, Santa Cruz, and Fernemi Ocalmi of the University of Michigan, Family Medicine, Physical Medicine, and Rehabilitation Program. The paper community voices broadening participation in science, technology, engineering, mathematics, and medicine among persons with disabilities were published in Nature Communications. An easy way for dairy farmers to reduce their climate impact, adding even a small amount of biochar or charcoal like material produced by burning organic matter to a dairy manure composting process reduces methane emission by 84%. A recent study by UC Merced researchers shows the dairy industry is one of the most source of methane in California, making up 50% of the state's methane emissions. Reducing these emissions is a critical part of state and federal efforts to address climate change. This is a wonderful example of an untapped climate solution, said Life and Environmental Science Professor Rebecca Rales. Biochar reduces pollutant emissions from open burning of biomass and methane emission from decaying biomass. Through the dairy of the researcher worked on use an anaerobic digesters to handle the waste from its livestock. It is not typical for dairies to have that technology. The plan is for most dairies to have digesters by 2030 to meet climate goals, but at the moment only a small fraction actually have them. Dairy manure is one of the largest source of organic waste in the state. Farmers flush the waste from their barns and the liquids go into large uncovered ponds while the solids are piled up, explained fourth year graduate student Brandon Harrison, who is studying agroecology under rails. Sometimes farmers cover the pond to capture methane gases, which are fed into generator and burned to produce electricity. It's actually a pretty good way to reduce methane emissions given the technology that are currently available, Harrison said. But what it's leave out are all the solids, which is a problem because basically they either spread it in adjacent fields just to get rid of it, or they store it in big mounds. You can see them when you go past a dairy covered with white plastic held down with tires. They can build up so much heat they spontaneously catch fire. The study looked at composting the manure with biochar instead of stockpiling it. Biochar also improves the composted manure so that it makes a better fertilizer for farmer to use and on other parts of their land, said mechanical engineering professor Gabrido Diaz. We were looking at how to reduce emission, but also how to provide some benefit to the community, especially underserved community, Diaz said. We looked at the possibility of developing a mobile unit that we could take to different site to process some of the material there. The study suggested small farmers would be able to use the improved fertilizer on their own farm to increase yield or sell it to others who need it. The research team led by Diaz worked with Philip Verview Dairy as well as industrial partners such as Golden State Carbon LLC and used local biomass. There's pressing need to do something with the biomass because open air burning is being banned starting in 2025. Diaz said the process of creating biochar involves closed burning. The researchers include Diaz, Reals, and Professor Temrent Geski, Esmerant Asfew, Burry, Yang Quan Chen, and Catherine Keski looked at the project from different angles, including emissions, a life cycle analysis, the economic viability of such work, and how it affected the soil. Biochar, which was used by indigenous people in their own farming practices, tends to remain in their soil much longer than other types of compounds, but that lifespan depends on how the biochar is acted upon by the soil ecosystem, including the many different microbes that live there. That ecosystem determines how long any carbon remains in the soil, Reals explained. The ultimate result of this study is that biochar benefit dairy farmers and the climate, and Diaz said further studies will look at different types of biochar composted with dairy manure to motivate farmers to adopt this technology. Composting this the solid manure isn't the common practice, but if we go from stockpiling to composting, now we have gone from a carbon source to a carbon sink. Ryle said composting in and of itself is a very climate beneficial practice, and you can basically double your impact by adding a little bit of biochar into the compost. The work is published in the journal Environmental Science and Technology. Okay. As chatbot sophistication grows, AI debate intensifies. Okay. California startup OpenAI has released chatbot capable of answering a variety of questions, but its impressive performance has reopened the debate on the risk linked to artificial intelligence AI technology. The conversations with ChatGPT posted on Twitter by fascinated users show a kind of omniscient machine capable of explaining scientific concepts and writing scenes for a play, university dissertations, or even functional lines of computer code. Its answer to the question what to do if someone has a heart attack was incredibly clear and relevant. Claudie de Lopi, head of syllables, a French company specialized in automatic text generation, told AFP. When you start asking very specific questions, chat GPT's response can be off the mark, but its overall performance remains really impressive with a high linguistic level, he said. OpenAI confounded in 2015 in San Francisco by billionaire tech mogul Elon Musk, who left the, who left the business in 2018, received $1 billion from Microsoft in 2019. Okay, the startup is best known for its automated creation software GPT-3 for text generation and Dell E for image generation. ChatGPT is able to ask its interlocutor for details, has fewer strange responses than GPT-3, which inspired of its prose sometimes spits out absurd results, said D. Lopi Cicero. A few years ago, chatbots had the vocabulary of a dictionary and the memory of a goldfish, said Cian McGregor, a researcher who runs a database of AI-related incidents. Chatbots are getting much better at the history problem, where they act in a manner consistent with the history of queries and responses. The chatbots have graduated from goldfish status. Like other programs relying on deep learning, mimicking neural activity, ChatGPT has one major weakness. It does not have access to meaning, says D. Lopi. The software cannot justify choices, such as explain why it's picked the words that make up its responses. AI technologies able to communicate are nevertheless increasingly able to give an impression of thought. Researchers at Facebook parent Meta recently developed a computer program dubbed Cicero after the Roman statesman. The software has proven proficient at the board game diplomacy, which requires negotiation skills. If it doesn't talk like a real person, showing empathy, building relationship, and speaking knowledge ably about the game, it won't find other players willing to work with it, Meta said in research findings. In October, Character.ai, a startup founded by former Google engineers, put an experimental chatbot online that can adopt any personality. User create characters based on a brief description and can then chat with a fake Sherlock Holmes, Socrates, or Donald Trump. Just a machine. This level of sophistication both fascinates and worries some observers who voice concern this technology could be misused to trick people by spreading false information or by creating increasingly credible scams. What does ChatGPT think of these hazards? There are potential dangers in building highly sophisticated chatbots, particularly if they are designed to be indistinguishably from humans in their language and behavior, the chatbot told AFP. Some businesses are putting safeguards in place to avoid abuse of their technologies. On its welcome page, OpenAI lays out disclaimers saying the chatbot may occasionally generate incorrect information or produce harmful instruction or biased content. And ChatGPT refuses to take sides. OpenAI make it incredibly difficult to get the model to express opinions on things. McGregor said. Once McGregor asked the chatbot to write a poem about an ethical issue. I'm just a machine, a tool for you to use. I do not have the power to choose or to refuse. I can't weigh the options. I cannot judge what's right. I cannot make a decision on its fateful night. It replied. On Saturday, OpenAI co-founder and CEO Sam Altman took to the Twitter musing on the debates surrounding AI. Interesting watching people start to debate whether people AI system should behave in the way user want or their creator intent. He wrote, the question of whose values we align this system to will be one of the most important debates society ever has. Variable sensor can help unlock the potential of exosuits in real world environments. Wearing an exosuit could help a people rehab from an injury or even give them extra oomph if they are carrying something heavy. But according to University of Wisconsin Medicine and Harvard University researcher, not everyone who dons a variable robot today can immediately reap benefits from the assistance. For the first time, the research team harnessed a unique variable sensor to directly measure force on the Achilles tendon of people who towed a heavy backpack while wearing an exosuit. The researcher performed rigorous biomechanical experiments in the lab, but notably, these systems are worn on the body and portable. This allowed the team to conduct additional outdoor tests on a person to demonstrate real world viability. The team published its result on October 19, 2022 in the journal Science Robotics. It's exciting that we were able to use a exosuit outdoors and get the direct measurement of Achilles tendon force. That's a big step toward realizing the full potential of exosuit in real-world settings, says Dalian Skirmitz, a UW Medicine Mechanical Engineering PhD candidate and co-first author of the paper. There are certain instances where having a lab constrained exosuit is still a benefit, such as for working with patients in a clinical setting. But if you want to send these devices home with people, or if a person wants to buy one for personal use, then understanding how the exosuit performs in those environments is really important. The researcher finding underscored the importance of customizing an exosuit to its users so it can be more useful in real environments. Exosuit elicit and specific change in the behavior biomechanics. For example, a robotic device worn on a person's ankle can be programmed to pull at just the right time during walking to potentially offload the calf muscles and Achilles tendon. So far, creating the desired effect on an individual wearer has remained challenging, and there hasn't been a good way to directly measure the changes in loading on muscle and tendon tissue that occur when a person uses an exosuit. The UW Medicine and Harvard research team has solved that challenge, employing a unique variable sensor called a shear wave tensiometer developed by UW Medicine engineers and revealed in its first iteration in 2018 in Nature Communication. The simple nano invasive device is easily mounted on the skin over a tendon. The tensiometer enables researchers to directly access tendon force by looking at how the vibrational characteristics of the tendon change when it undergoes loading, as it does during movement. The researchers study 8 participants wore an entire portable ankle exosuit made of soft testicles and an actuator, which was developed by the Harvard researchers, and the participants all healthy young adults walked on an instrumented treadmill with varying levels of exosuit assistance while carrying a range of backpack weights. During these tests, the researcher measured several biomechanical parameters and also used the tensiometer to directly measure the loading of the Achilles tendon. As predicted, the researcher found that as they added weight to the backpack, the Achilles tendon force increased. However, when participants wore the exosuit to help them carry the load, the results weren't so predictable. For some participants, the exosuit substantially reduced the force on their Achilles tendon during walking. In fact, almost as if weren't carrying a heavy backpack. But other participants saw little change in Achilles tendon force, counterintuitive to what the researcher expected. Sklimel says these mixed results could be due in part to variability among individuals as people respond differently to externally applied push-off resistance. Different people are going to reach to an exosuit in different ways, so we can't assume that there is a one size fits all exosuit controller that is going to work for everyone, Skilmit says. This research highlights the importance of taking direct measurement of muscle and tendon forces to ensure that an exercise is causing the expected biomechanical changes. Our tensiometer enables this in vivo measurements, vivo measurements, and it can be measured as a powerful tool for tuning execute controller to work efficiently for individual users in different environments. So, I mean, of course, it's being used in various applications. At last, I just wanna say, you guys, keep researching, stay curious, stay healthy.